meeting of the Finance, Council Affairs, and Administrative Services Committee. It's 7:34 p.m. and per Governor Pritzker's executive order related to the Open Meetings Act, we are able as a committee to meet quorum requirements via electronic attendance. And I would ask that those committee members and staff that are participating by teleconference, if you please would place your phone on mute when you're not speaking to help us all have a better audio experience during this meeting. So at this time, Director Trezine, can you please call the roll?
Alderman Toledo.
Here.
Alderman York.
Here.
Alderman Braham.
Here.
Alderman Park.
Here.
4 present.
Trezine, would you?
4 present, 0 absent, all by phone.
And can you also just indicate who else is attending the meeting, either on the conference call or in person, please?
Yes, I will. So on the phone also is City Attorney Storino and Durkin and Bob Davidson from Assurance. Here at City Hall are the Mayor Morley, City Manager Grabowski, Fire Chief Freeman, HR Director Emily Wagner, Assistant City Manager Mike Kopp, Assistant Finance Director Lori Hayes, Finance Director Tom Trozine, and IT Director Mike Stenson.
I hope you guys are in a big room far apart.
We are all 6 feet away in conference 2-3.
And Director Trezine, are there any members of the public there?
No public present.
Great, thank you. So we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is public comment. Residents and guests, as you may have all seen on board docs, have had the opportunity to submit public comment online via a form, as well as email. In addition, we did invite residents and guests to physically attend the host site at City Hall, as long as social distancing guidelines were followed. It appears that at this time there's no one from the public there. Finally, residents and guests are encouraged to follow the committee proceedings via live stream audio on the city's YouTube channel. And you can find that by just searching for City of Elmhurst YouTube, Elmhurst TV. Director Trezine, if you have any submitted public comments through the form at this time, can you please read them in the order of their receipt?
Yes, I can. Alderman York or Alderman Toledo, we did receive one via email that I will read. Thank you very much for providing this opportunity to provide public comment via email. Furthermore, I appreciate the steps that the mayor and various city officials have taken to address the COVID-19 pandemic, to mitigate community spread and to keep the public informed. I am providing public comment about the proposed resolution that would exempt Elmhurst first responders from the paid sick leave provisions of the FFCRA. As a frequent visitor to Elmhurst, including places like Elmhurst Hospital that have a high risk of transmission, I think it's important for everyone to do their part in limiting the community's exposure to COVID-19. The draft resolution that is posted on board docs would exempt Elmhurst first responders from all paid sick leave provisions of the FFCRA, including public health emergency leave and emergency paid sick leave. Therefore, if a first responder gets sick or comes into close contact with somebody who is showing symptoms of COVID-19, that person would be forced to choose between reporting to work and complying with medical guidance to stay at home. That puts other first responders and the general public at risk. I strongly recommend that you oppose this draft resolution as currently written. Having said that, I recognize that the FFCRA also provides paid leave to care for a child whose school or daycare has been closed to COVID-19. Indeed, the mayor's draft executive order and the city manager's memo to the committee, both published yesterday, appear to exempt first responders from only this specific type of leave. I am pleased to see that in the more recent days, the city appears to be moving towards allowing first responders to take paid sick leave if they or a family member are subject to a quarantine or self-isolation order. As for the exemptions pertaining to childcare, I hope that the city would be able to provide alternative childcare options for first responders, similar to the temporary daycare provided to employees of Elmhurst Hospital, which Mayor Morley has approved in Executive Order 2020-01. Kind regards, Edgar Pal.
Thank you, Director Kazin. Are there any other public comments that were either submitted or has anyone else appeared in City Hall for public comment at this time?
No additional comments. No one else here.
Okay, I'll then move and close public comments portion of this meeting and move on to item 4, receipt of written communication. Director Terzine, were there any written communications other than the public comments that were previously submitted that we should be aware of?
None received.
Okay, thank you. I will then move on to item 5, business before the committee. The first item on that agenda topic is the meeting procedures, agenda item 5A. So I would like to take this opportunity to summarize how I'd like to proceed through this meeting in order to ensure that everyone on the phone, and especially all committee members and staff, have the opportunity to share their questions, concerns, and comments both efficiently and that everyone gets a chance to be heard. So again, I'll reiterate that this is a teleconference committee meeting whereby all committee members are meeting electronically pursuant to the governor's executive order relative to the Open Meetings Act. The executive order allows members to meet electronically in order to minimize physical social interaction. With regard to each of the agenda items, I plan to introduce the item and then refer to the appropriate staff member or consultant to present information relative to the topic to the committee. This is very consistent with our normal procedures when we're having in-person committee meetings. I will then recognize individually Vice Chair York, Alderman Park, and Alderman Graham to ask questions or make comments. I would ask that any speaker, to make this a little bit more efficient, indicate that they have concluded their comments by stating so. Thank you, or I yield, or I'm done for now, something to indicate that you're done with your comments at that point in time. I'll then recognize the mayor and myself for comments. I'll quote, end the round of comments by asking staff or our consultants or attorneys to clarify or add any information that was based on elected officials' questions and comments during that prior round of comments, if you will. If it appears to me that more elected officials have additional questions or comments, I will again recognize the individual committee members and other elected officials as previously shared. At the conclusion, so I'll kind of keep going through those rounds of committee members, the mayor and myself, and then staff questions or comments. And we'll just keep going through that until we, as a committee, have fully deliberated the agenda item. If the agenda item requires action by the committee at that time, I will ask for a motion and a second. And after those have been provided, then I'll ask Director Terzine to call a roll call. That's kind of a summary of how I intend to try to move through this remote teleconference-based committee meeting. Any questions from the committee members themselves about this process?
None. It sounds like a plan.
Okay, so then we will move on then to item B, minutes of the March 9th, 2020 meeting of the Finance, Council Affairs, and Administrative Services Committee. Are there any changes to the minutes as posted? No.
I'd make a motion that we accept the minutes. Second.
Okay, I am entertaining a motion by Alderman York and a second by Alderman Bram to approve the minutes as written and posted on the board docs agenda. Director Trozine, I have a motion and a second. Can you please call a roll call vote on the minutes as written?
Alderman Toledo,
Aye.
Alderman York,
Aye.
Alderman Bram,
Aye.
Alderman Park.
Aye.
4 yeas via phone, 0 nay.
Okay, motion is approved. The minutes are approved. We will now move on to item C. Item C is our next item of business. It's a resolution excluding the emergency responders of the city of Elmhurst from certain provisions of the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, otherwise known as FFCRA. I don't know, it's a mouthful. As we all know, we're currently, as a community, country, and world, battling the COVID-19 pandemic. This is an unprecedented situation and calls for all of us to take steps that are both, as we all have seen, exceptional and also contrary to our desire for independence. And this agenda item that we're going to be discussing addresses an exceptional situation where we as a local government are balancing the need to continue to provide the critical city services such as police, fire, and wastewater treatment to the residents who live in this community, while at the same time working to protect and provide assistance to those emergency city employees who are being asked to continue to do this emergency work. I'm confident that we can do both. So at this time, I'd like to turn this over to City Manager Jim Grabowski and City Attorney Mike Durkin to provide some additional background on this agenda item.
Thank you, Chair.
City Manager Grabowski.
Thank you, Chair Toledo. I appreciate that. Thank you for the introduction to what we're going to talk about as well. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yep. Yes.
Great, thank you. So as the chair said, obviously we're in some unique times, and because of that, President Trump signed a piece of legislation that is meant to help those who are affected by the coronavirus or COVID-19. And when that document was signed, when that law was signed, actually when it was drafted in such a way that they recognized, Congress and the president recognized the unique situation that first responders are in and the employers of first responders, of which we are. And that's not just fire and police, which people traditionally think of. It also extends into our public works department, as the chair indicated. So this law came out, and according to the city attorney, it was about a 150-page law, which she was able to boil down into 4 pages, and that was attached to the board docs site under client alert. Hopefully you had a chance to read that. So the client alert was written for us and for other municipalities so that we were aware of this exemption provision in the act so that we could exempt our public safety and emergency responders from the act so that we can provide continuity of services, as Chair Toledo indicated. As I said, providing the emergency services of fire, police, water, wastewater, if it came down to it, clearing roads, plowing, dealing with electrical emergencies and other things could happen during this pandemic. And we need to be able to schedule our first responders so that we have adequate coverage throughout our city. So the act, the 2 provisions that affect us are the Family Medical Leave Act expansion. And
City Manager Grabowski, could you pause for a moment? We have someone whose phone, if anyone who's listening, please mute your phone. There is a little bit of background noise, making it a little bit more difficult to hear City Manager Grabowski. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So the act, the two provisions of the act that we need to be concerned with are the Family and Medical Leave Act expansion and the Emergency Paid Sick Leave Act. Attorney Wolf, who was not on the phone, was supposed to be, but had a conflict of a meeting did a great job in explaining that in the client alert as to how these two portions affect our scheduling for our emergency responders. Essentially, the expansion of the Family and Medical Leave Act provision would allow first responders to take up to 12 weeks off to care for a minor child when their school or their daycare is canceled due to the COVID-19 pandemic. We're already subject to the Family Medical Leave Act, Medical Leave Act of 1993, which allows for 12 weeks for an employee to take 12 weeks for care of themselves or a relative, an immediate relative. That remains, but the enhancement would allow our employees to take off time for essentially daycare or watching over a minor child in the event their school's canceled. The second portion of the act, of the law that we are concerned with, is the Emergency Paid Sick Leave Act. And what this does, it extends 2 weeks of sick time to every employee in our organization on top of the sick leave that they already have. And as part of that, there were 6 qualifying reasons that an employee would be able to take that. The first 3 reasons are for basically self-care or care of an immediate family member that is sick with COVID-19. It also covers those who might be in quarantine or isolation because of that, because of contact with somebody. The 5th reason is that the employee is caring for their minor child if the child's school or place of care has been closed due to the COVID-19 precautions. And then the 6th one is kind of a catch-all of any other conditions as enumerated by the Secretary of Health and Human Services and the Secretaries of Treasurer and Labor. So in those 6 qualifying reasons, number 5 is the one that concerns us. And it's very similar to the FMLA Act, where the employee can take the time to care for their minor child if it's due to school or daycare closings. So when this came out and we reviewed it, I sat down with Chief Ruth, Chief Freeman, and also Public Works Director Killian to discuss this and how it might affect our organization. And we have great concern that as written, and if not addressed tonight, that employees with minor children who have daycare issues or with minor children could tomorrow come up and say, I need to stay home because I don't have daycare. And that could include, we did a survey of our employees. We believe at least 133 employees could be affected by this as we have it right now. Now that is all employees. That's not just the public safety. That's all employees. So it's a little bit less than half of our workforce. So what we are proposing tonight is that the mayor sign an executive order after this meeting, which would exempt our public safety and emergency responders from this act in two portions. The first, exempt them completely from the Family and Medical Leave Act expansion. And then second, from qualifying reason number 5 under the Emergency Paid Sick Leave Act. So what that means on the second portion, the Emergency Paid Sick Leave Act, is that any employee who is diagnosed with COVID-19, has symptoms, or is quarantined would get that 2 weeks of sick time at their full pay. So we're not we're not asking the mayor and the council to exempt the employees from that portion, but we are asking for the exemption on the daycare and school care of a minor child due to scheduling issues. We just can't afford to have all employees who are eligible to do this decide to take off at the same time. It would not allow for proper coverage on the emergency responder side, and we would be in we'd be in a hard place with scheduling for the remainder of the employees. Now, the memo that I attached to the agenda had only police and fire employees. But after I wrote that, the Department of Labor issued a clarifying statement, and I'll ask Mike Durkin to touch on that in a minute, but they issued a clarifying statement that public works employees are considered emergency responders. That's what led me to talk to Director Killian about where we stand on that. Clearly, sewer and water, we're not turning those services off. Water continues to flow, and we need to treat all the effluent. So we definitely need those employees. And then as we continue to discuss it, if an emergency were to come up, such as a stormwater issue perhaps, or if we got some kind of late spring snowstorm, or just any storm that rolls through with high winds, we would definitely need the remainder of our public works employees to be able to come in basically at a moment's notice, certainly on their regular schedule. So Mike, can you talk a little bit, Mike Durkin, can you talk a little bit about the Department of Labor's clarification?
Yes, you did a great summary of the statute, but everybody should focus on this term, emergency responders. The statute didn't contain a definition of emergency responders, and in fact stated that the Department of Labor would issue regulations actually describing what that term meant. We all thought that emergency responders would include sworn police officers and firefighters. There was a hope that personnel such as telecommunicators would be considered emergency responders, but the National Public Employee Labor Relations Association, as one of many employer groups representing municipalities, requested a more expansive term, including public works employees, because of the reasons that Jim mentioned. So, lo and behold, 2 weeks after the act was promulgated, last Saturday, March 28th, instead of issuing their regulations, the Department of Labor issued a guidance that contained over 57 questions and answers, including they described who is an emergency responder, and they included public works employees. So that triggered a flurry in the last few days of municipalities seeking to either amend the actions that they previously took to exempt sworn members of their police and fire departments, or to do what you're doing now, adopt something that will allow you to continue to operate these essential infrastructure activities that public works employees perform. So it's important to remember that it's more than just first responders. The term in the act is emergency responders. That term includes sworn police officers, sworn members of the fire department, and public works and personnel. So the legislation that we are seeking to have approved, and prior to that approval, ratify the mayor's executive order excluding only those employees, sworn members of the city police department, sworn members of the city fire department and city public works employees from application of only the school closing or child care loss under the extended Family Medical Leave Act provisions, and the sick leave, emergency sick leave benefits for that very same reason. I want to emphasize that in the draft resolution and also in the emergency order, the city reiterates that the emergency responders who would be exempted are eligible and continue to be eligible for the benefits provided under paragraph 1 through 4, as Manager Grabowski described, for the emergency sick leave pay, and paragraph 6, which to date HUD has still not identified any individuals under that. But if an employee is sick or is caring for a sick family member due to coronavirus, or if they have symptoms of coronavirus and have been ordered to stay home, or they are ordered to be quarantined or isolated, those employees continue to receive the emergency sick leave pay. Contrary to the opening of the public comment, the city is not seeking at this point in time to deprive any emergency responders of those types of sick leave benefits.
Thank you, Mike. While you have your phone unmuted, can you talk about the significance of the April 1st deadline?
Yes, the act goes into effect on April 1st. As we sit here tonight, no employees nationwide are entitled to these benefits because they're not in effect yet. And so what that means is the current status quo with all bargaining unit employees is that they don't have these benefits. If you act now, you are essentially preserving the status quo, and we believe that these issues are permissive subjects of bargaining for employers of emergency responders. The law gives you the right to say, I don't want to be covered under that. As of April 1st, when the law goes into effect, if you have not exempted those emergency responders, it could be argued that you are depriving employees of an existing benefit anytime tomorrow or thereafter. And the unions could make an argument that we needed to bargain that with them. Since this is an emergency response, I'm sure the manager will talk more at length about what the what the city will do if you encounter an employee that child care does become an issue. But that would be something that would follow this exemption that I believe that you are required to act on tonight before the law actually kicks in.
Thank you again, Mike. I appreciate that. So following up with what Attorney Durkin said, Mayor and I have had a number of conversations regarding this legislation and what it means to our scheduling and our employees. We are not looking to deprive any employee of a benefit. However, due to the nature of the work that we do in some of our departments, we do find it necessary to control that scheduling. If, however, an employee comes to us and has an issue with daycare or with a minor child care, we absolutely will work with them, whether it's through schedule changes, shift trades, alternative time off, whatever needs to be done to work with the employees. We will also help them try to find childcare to the extent that we can. We absolutely value our employees and what they do, and so we will absolutely work with them. But what we can't afford as I said early on, is for a great number of employees to come to us at any one time and say that they need time off and basically not show up for scheduled days to take care of their minors. We have been doing a number of surveys through DuPage Mayor and Managers and different groups like that. We've compiled them all for tonight. Actually, literally an hour before this meeting, we finally compiled everything. And I think we have a good cross section of the Chicagoland area in what municipalities are doing as far as exempting public safety and or public works. And when I say a good cross section, we have a lot of DuPage County, as you can imagine. We have some Lake County, we have some Cook County, and maybe even, I thought I saw a Will County community in here. And so on the public safety exemption, so police and fire, we have 29 respondents, and of that, 20 are exempting their public safety. And then on the public works side, and since that was a little different than police and fire, we only had 25 respondents. Some people just did not reply whether they were going to exempt public works or not. Of that, 12 are exempting their public works from the federal law. So just to give the committee an idea of where other communities are coming from, this has been quite a bit of talk on conference calls that the mayor and I have been on, and a lot of concern from municipal leaders as to how they're going to achieve coverage in the event that they don't exempt their emergency responders.
Hey, Jim, can I add that, this is Mike Durkin. Can I add that once again, the reason the numbers may be influenced for public works, I think, is largely attributed to the fact that nobody knew that public works employees would be considered emergency responders. There was hope for that, but it was a no-brainer that police and fire would be included. So I think people thought the need to act quickly and only spoke to those types of employees. And now you're starting to see a rush to deal with this public works inclusion in emergency responders. Sorry for the interruption.
No, thank you, Mike. I appreciate that. So, Chair Toludo, I will end with what we're asking the committee to think about and support tonight. Because of the unique circumstances with the emergency declaration, we are asking the mayor to sign an executive order tonight, which will exempt those three groups, fire, police, and public works, from the FMLA portion and reason number 5 of the sick leave portion. And we would like the committee to support that. And then we would also like the committee to consider a report for the April 6th City Council meeting, where we will have a resolution on there ratifying the mayor's executive order exempting our employees. And that concludes my comments.
Thank you, City Manager Grabowski and City Attorney Durkin, sorry, for that background. So as I had discussed earlier, I'm going to go ahead and move on to comments or questions from the committee, and I will start with Vice Chairman York.
Thank you, Chair. So I think the summary was excellent. I just have a couple of things that come to mind. One of them I think is really huge, and I didn't hear it addressed at all. I have a specific question on point number 4 of the Emergency Paid Sick Leave Act. And I get it. It says the employee is caring for an individual who is subject to government quarantine or isolation order. I get that. The word individual to me is fairly broad. And why couldn't somebody say, you know, I'm caring for somebody, it's a second cousin or a friend or whatever, which is different than a spouse or a child or, you know, something like that. So that concerns me a little bit. And I'm going to then ask the second question that really concerns me. And then perhaps we can get, all the replies going to come at the end after everybody's done asking questions.
That's what I would like to do, Alderman York. So I'd ask city staff or our attorneys to keep maybe a running list of the committee members' questions. We'll go through each committee member, the mayor and myself, and then the city staff can respond to all of the questions. I think it might just, if the city staff can keep track of the questions, that would be helpful.
Will do.
Okay. So the second concern, which is huge, is kind of multifaceted. So in Elmhurst, we often talk about the relationship we have with Superior Ambulance in providing paramedic services, which in this case is very unique from a city that hires and employs its own paramedics. So my question is, how are we guaranteed, or what is our position relative to the paramedics that we contract with Metro to be at work every day and kind of be following these, you know, same rough guidelines so that we're not left without these most critical emergency service providers. So I think, do you guys all understand the gist of my question and kind of how big of an issue it really is?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. Mike Durkin.
Okay. So,
Alderman York, just a second. City Manager Grabowski, I think, can you just confirm that you understand Alderman York's question and before he moves on?
Yes, I do.
Okay, thank you.
okay, there's just a lot of aspects of it that I think that we need to, you know, that we need to contemplate on this. So, those are my two big things. I've read over all the information that's been presented. I've listened carefully to all the comments and everything that everybody's added to this. It's made it very easy to understand something that's, you know, pretty complex. So I appreciate the effort that everybody's put into making it digestible for us. I am in support of what city staff is recommending, that the mayor sign the proclamation. I am in support of that, but I'm very concerned about the two items I brought up. That is all I have for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman York. We'll now move on to the same kind of format with Alderman Park. Would you like to share any questions or comments at this time?
I appreciate Alderman York's point that the paramedics are a little bit different, not under the same umbrella as our police and fire. So I am interested in that as well. You know, I would hope they'd be following the same guidelines. You know, I think everybody is ready to pitch in. So other than that, it's all good. I have been listening carefully and had a great conversation with City Manager Grabowski today. So I appreciate the work everybody's put into this. Thanks.
Thank you, Alderman Park. Alderman Graham?
Yes, thank you. Alderman York already highlighted my major concern, and that's how Superior does work into this equation. I know we can only control from a perspective of our employees, being fire, police, and public works, but that is a big concern, so I'm interested in hearing the further details and further discussion on that. The only other thing that I had questions on was, excuse me, my voice is breaking up, was in regards to the process at hand. I'm not, and I know Attorney Durkin has made mention of it, but I'd like further discussion and or clarification on how, following this process of signing, having the mayor execute the act tonight, be any different than writing a report and having the, whatever it is, resolution on the agenda on the April 6th meeting or 7th meeting, whatever day that is, 6th. No further.
Thank you, Alderman Bram. City Manager Grabowski or our member of our attorneys on the phone, do you understand Alderman Bram's second question before I move on?
Yes, Mike Durkin.
This is Jim. I don't understand it, but Mike Durkin, do you understand it?
Yes, I do.
Okay. So we'll save the answer to that question.
Do you want a short answer on the Metro or Superior concern now? Because everyone seems to be raising.
Sure. Go ahead. Is that Mike Durkin?
Yes. Jim, you can join in, but I spoke to corporate counsel for that company late last week with regard to a different bargaining unit and the effects of this law on that bargaining unit. And I was assured by Kim Godden that the act only applies to employers of less than 500 employees. And according to Kim, their entities, their multiple entities in aggregate, exempt them from application of this law in its entirety. So they don't have to deal with the issues that you're dealing with tonight.
Okay, I will ask a follow-up on behalf of the rest of the committee then, since we're going down this path right now. They're exempt from the act, but was there any other information provided either to you, Mr. Durkin, or to city staff that addresses how they will deal with if they, how are they dealing with their staffing overall and having people not showing up or anything like that? Did they basically say all citizens are green, or did they give any other explanation other than they don't have to, none of their employees can qualify for this leave as this act describes, but did they give any other indication of their service level to the city of Elmhurst? Thanks.
This is Mike Durkin again. I would defer to Jim on that with respect to Elmhurst, as I indicated that my conversation concerned a different bargaining unit where they were the employer and had a collective bargaining agreement and discussed with them whether they were going to exempt themselves as emergency responders, and their response was that the statute didn't apply to them. Putting that aside, I didn't pursue, are they going to continue to be able to provide service to Elmhurst? I imagine Jim may have an answer on that.
Yeah, thank you, Mike.
Finished.
Thank you, Mike. When this pandemic started, I talked with Chief Freeman about it, and just as a background, I'll tell you that Superior we have 5 Superior employees per shift in both of our fire stations, so 2 per ambulance and then the rapid response vehicle. And we have a total of 15 employees from Superior that are assigned to the city of Elmhurst. As Mike Durkin indicated, they have a large number of employees in that building on Lake Street, and they can substitute employees when needed. One other step that we took, and then I'll turn it over to Tom Freeman for a little bit. We had Superior put on a 3rd ambulance as a transport ambulance only, so not an what am I thinking of? Not an ALS ambulance, but a BLS ambulance, only for the transport of suspected COVID patients, so that we weren't contaminating one of our frontline ambulances. Tom, what else can you add to that?
Well, part of the contract with Superior Metro is whether or not somebody is sick on any given day, there will always be 5 people. So it's a person-for-person agreement with Metro. So regardless of the reason, there will always be 5 medics. The third medic unit has been called into service already. This was arranged through Mike Tillman, has already been called into service to transport suspected COVID patients in a BLS mode so as not to potentially contaminate a paramedic unit, and it would reduce then the out of service time of the frontline medics. So that's been running also, but we've never been less than 5 or less than the 15 complement that the contract calls for. And if today somebody went home mid-shift or tomorrow somebody called in, there's a guaranteed replacement for that person as a function of the Metro agreement.
Okay, thank you to everyone who responded to that question. I think I'll move on to get comments and questions from Mayor Morley at this time. And we will, as we go through the first round, if we come back and any of the committee members are not satisfied or have a further question related to any of this, they'll have an opportunity to ask that. But at this time, Mayor Morley, would you like to make any comments or have any questions?
Sure, happy to do that. I don't have any questions. As City Manager mentioned, we've been talking about this twice a day for a week. But I do want to thank staff for all the attention that has been given to this. I think just the participation that you hear shows how serious we're taking this. I think this isn't the first time, and it certainly won't be the last time in this crisis where I'll call it a blanket law is written with all good intention, but then it's thrown down to us, whether it's from the federal or state level. And I've been on numerous calls where the direction from the folks who have passed the law is figure it out at your level. So this is a very challenging thing that we're doing here. And I think staff and our attorneys are doing a good job tackling it. I also want to compliment Alderman Toledo for the first remote meeting that we're having. I think you're running a fine meeting at this point. I think during these difficult times, it is very important to not only provide these critical services to the residents of Elmhurst, but show to them that we have a plan. And I think that that's what we're doing here. In my opinion, what it really boils down to is we're exempting a little sliver of this act that has been passed, just a small sliver of it. And it's really, the way I look at it is it's the way we're handling scheduling. If you get sick or not, if your family gets sick, all of this good intentions, if you will, in the FFCRA still remain. But as it relates to just this one small portion, as it relates to daycare and kids out of school, we're going to address it in a different manner here at City Hall and with city staff. And I know staff is already looking at options to help individual employees if they have an issue. So our intent isn't to exempt anybody from the benefits. It's just there is a problem that has been identified from the top on down that people might have a problem with daycare, and we are opting out of the mandated way of handling this problem, and we're going to handle it in a different way, but we are not removing that safety net from our first responders. But certainly it's critical, whether it's police, fire, wastewater, regular water system. This stuff is critical, and we can't, this early, I'm going to speculate and say we're not halfway through this thing yet. We can't stumble this early into this. So we have to make some difficult but strong decisions. And I'd reiterate that not only do I support this, I know the city manager does, the police chief does, the fire chief does, Director Killian all support this direction. So I don't have any questions, and I appreciate this committee tackling this tough issue. And those are my comments.
Thank you, Mayor Morley. Now I'll turn the floor to myself. I appreciate everyone's comments and questions so far. And I wanted to take an opportunity to personally thank both the staff that has been working throughout this whole response to this pandemic, and also specifically on this particular agenda item regarding this act. I know everyone's putting in a lot of time and effort, and they're also dealing with their own families and their own situations at home. I'd also especially like to thank the police, our police force, our firefighters, and our public works employees who are, coming to work every day, doing the best that they can in these, very unusual times, trying to figure out how to nicely ask people to leave the basketball court at the park district and whatnot. Everyone's dealing with some unusual jobs these days. So thank you to everyone. And also to the residents of the city of Elmhurst, we're all, making sacrifices as a community, and we hope that we begin to see this curve begin to bend. As it relates to this agenda topic specifically, I wanted to reiterate, I also have had the opportunity to talk and ask lots of my questions already, but I did want to reiterate some of the things that I've heard various folks say for the benefit of the public that may be listening and other elected officials, is that first off, we want to protect the essential public services that we provide as a government to the residents of Elmhurst. And we will continue to do that. And we will work with any employees who will be exempted from these particular components of this act, as City Manager Grabowski stated, on a case-by-case basis and on a scheduling basis, to do the best we can if an employee finds themselves in a situation where they have lack of childcare for a minor. And I also finally wanted to reiterate that what someone else had said, but that emergency responders will still be able to access the other parts of the Emergency Paid Sick Leave Act. For example, if they suspect they have COVID-19 or are caring for someone who has it, they will be able to gain the benefit under the Emergency Paid Sick Leave Act. We are not exempting them from those components, only the one related to the child care, and we will work with those employees in those situations. So I am in support of this as staff and has laid it out. I would like to turn it back to staff. I think there were a couple of other questions from the aldermen that we still need to address. City Manager Grabowski, would you like to take the floor? Thank you.
Yes, thank you. So regarding qualifying reason number 4, honestly, Alderman York, we had not talked much about that one because it's a pretty broad category there, catch-all, where the employee is caring for an individual is subject. But if they've had close contact with somebody who's in quarantine or advised by a healthcare provider to self-quarantine, we're probably going to find a way to get the employee time off to be quarantined as well. Mike Durkin, I don't know if you have had any conversation with other communities or within your circles about number 4.
Jim, it's a very broad term, as you stated. Generally, the FMLA describes family members and defines family members. This term, individual, is broad. I believe that you have to have some kind of faith in your employees that they are going to only utilize that leave for legitimate purposes. You do have the right to ask for proof or validation as to why they are using this type of leave. It's not HIPAA protected information that they're caring for somebody. It's, as you said, I don't think that's been a focus. Unfortunately, There's nothing in the guidances that the Department of Labor has issued that defines that. So we just have to, as the mayor said, work it out at the local level, and we'll do the best we can, making sure there's no abuse of that.
Alderman York, I hope that.
Alderman York, I'm going to go off my process a little and just ask you, based on the information provided to your question, if you have a follow-up question or clarification. Alderman York?
No, I understand that individual is a broad term. That's what, kind of, brought it up. So I agree that we just need to kind of do the right thing. It is good to know that not everything is HIPAA protected, so we can kind of figure it out. I never asked this question suspecting that we had anybody in our employment who would try and take advantage of a situation, but the term individual certainly lends itself to that occurring. So I'm okay with it. I guess we'll just kind of have to see how it plays out, and then it's a work in progress, and we'll see what happens. But I appreciate the answer and the thought given to it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Alderman York. I'm going to take it back to City Manager Grabowski or a member of staff or attorneys as it relates to Alderman Graham's question on process.
You want me to take that, Jim?
Yes, please do, Mike.
First and foremost, the executive order is of limited duration.
Excuse me. This is Alderman York. Can we just repeat what the question was? It's been a while ago since the question was asked.
Why do you need to take action tonight? Why does the mayor have to issue an executive order tonight? Why isn't this being handled in the normal process of it going to the council based on a report of this committee? So my response is this is of limited duration. The executive order, it only lasts until the council meets. Again, the council still has the choice to confirm, ratify that action, and that could be yes or no on that. With respect to why does it need to be done tonight, I apologize that I wasn't clear enough the first time around, but let me try to emphasize it by giving you an analogy. I think there's a stop sign up at midnight tonight that the unions will say, you blew through that stop sign and you were supposed to stop and talk to us as of April 1st. I did have a conversation with the attorney for the FOP today, specifically about Elmhurst and what parameters the council was going to take or the mayor was going to take tonight. And I am confident that they don't have an objection to this limited modification being made. As somebody said, a sliver of the act being carved out here. So if you don't act tonight, it puts us in a position that you may not be able to act, or you may have committed an unfair labor practice if you do it after tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Durkin. Alderman Graham, in the same way that I did with Alderman York, do you have a follow-up or a clarifying response to the answer to your question?
Yeah, thank you. I guess I'm unclear on why it would be an unfair labor practice. I mean, from my understanding, this is the first opportunity to review this. We're doing that. I would guess that it could be argued that if the ratifying vote on the following council meeting, being April 6th, does not move this forward or extend it forward, then that same argument could be put in place. So from a procedural perspective, to me, it seems like this is saying that this is good for a week and it may or may not move forward. So I'm just struggling with understanding on why the week difference is going to make a difference instead of just following normal procedure. I understand, Attorney Durkin, you said about the unfair labor practices, but obviously I'm no attorney. I don't see on how we're taking some type of action by discussing it. And if we decided to move forward with a report, that would be also action. So taking that emergency or executive order is a step for a week. I don't see on how that makes a difference of labor practices.
Let me take another crack at it then. This is Mike Durkin. As we sit here tonight, this benefit is not available to the employees. It doesn't exist. It's legislation that takes effect tomorrow. So if we act tonight, we are preserving the status quo, and that's very significant in collective bargaining and when employers take actions to preserve the status quo. Tomorrow, when this benefit is available, all of these emergency responders are entitled to these benefits because the city did not exempt those employees at that time. It puts the unions in a different position and the city in a different position. And jumping ahead to April 6th, employees still won't have this as a benefit if the emergency declaration or the executive order is issued tonight. On April 6th, they don't have it unless the board, the council votes to not ratify this exemption.
Chairman Toledo, can I add one thing, and I'll turn to Don Storino on this. If the committee, let's say they approve a report tonight, even though we don't have a draft one, but hopefully we'll get direction to do that. If the committee directed staff to draft a report, let's say even if we took the step of signing a report tonight, that technically is not approval by the city council. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And so
You need the executive order to preserve what Michael Durkin was describing earlier.
thank you. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. I'm going at this time then, we've gone through all of our elected officials, first round of questions and comments. We've had staff answer or attempt to answer those questions, and we've had both Alderman York and Alderman Graham provide some follow-up and some clarification from staff on their questions. I'm going to go back to the top, if you will, at this time and ask each of the committee members if they have any additional comments or questions at this time. And I will start with Alderman York.
Thank you, Chairman Toledo. I have no additional questions or concerns at this point. And if you're willing, I would make a motion that we follow the staff recommendation and allow the mayor to put together an executive order as we've discussed tonight.
I appreciate that, Alderman York. Let me go through the rest of the committee members, and then I will entertain a motion once we go through the second round here, and we'll get to that, I hope, shortly. Thank you. Okay, since Alderman York doesn't have any additional questions or comments, Alderman Park, anything from you?
No, I mean, it's an interesting and new and different situation we've never had to think about. I understand what's happening and why it's happening. And I guess it's just what we need to do right now. So I think I'm good. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Alderman Graham?
Yeah, just a couple additional, one being, is there an opportunity, or it might be 100% or 0%, in regards to the extension of the Family Leave Act? Is there an opportunity to modify, instead of eliminating or exempting altogether, but modifying it from an extension of 12 weeks to something smaller if there is a concern of an extended leave of absence by any one or additional employee?
I'll take a stab at
Sorry,
that.
just a second, everyone. Alderman Graham, it sounded like you had a couple of questions. You want to get all of them out, and then we'll allow staff to respond?
Sure. The other question is, it was mentioned that if we do exempt all of the Family Leave Act, as well as the paragraph 5 of the other, that we would do everything we can in regards to child care. Do we have an ultimate concern that if this goes into effect, or when this goes into effect tomorrow, if we did nothing and it was the emergency workers were allowed to take advantage of this, that they would need to do so? And the reason why I ask is, even though it's not an ability today to do it, it seems like our workers have figured out a way to handle their child care to date under these circumstances. And I don't know why things would change just because this goes into effect. So those are the two questions.
Thank you, Alderman Graham. City Manager Grabowski or attorneys, could you respond, please?
I will, I'll start, and then I'll ask Mike Durkin to offer some comments as well. Regarding the modification of 12 weeks, I will ask Mike Durkin to comment on that. But before I do, let me say that we do have paid time off for all of our employees now. And so if we were to modify this down to something less, whether it's 2 weeks, 3 weeks, we do have some opportunities that employees can use paid time off for those type of things, this situation as well. Mike, I will ask you to opine on modifying the 12-week portion.
I think that with Manager Grabowski's earlier comments, that if employees have a need, you'll be able to treat them as the need arises, and that may include giving them less leave than what this statute imposes on you if you don't take any action tonight. It gives you flexibility to work out on individual bases what employees need. If they don't need more than 2 weeks help, then you'll have the flexibility that the Act doesn't provide. The Act imposes up to 12 weeks. So if they only need 2, you can craft an accommodation for them. And if they're in bargaining units, which all of these employees generally are, with the union's consent, you can grant them their case-by-case benefit.
Thank you, Mike. Regarding Alderman Graham's second question, if people are able to accommodate it now, why can't they accommodate it in the future? And Alderman Graham, we had quite a bit of discussion about this at the staff level. And while yes, some employees are probably able to accommodate that now, we don't know what's going to happen into the future. I think I heard today that both the governor and the president have extended the stay-at-home quarantine until the end of the month. And so what we worry about looking long-term is what happens to those caregivers, not just tomorrow, but 2 weeks from now, even a month from now. And what happens to, let's say, if it's your parents or your in-laws who are caring for your child, when they say it's time for us to go home, or some other situation where they lose their child care just because of length of time. That's our concern.
Or they get sick. Sorry,
Yes.
I just had to interject that. Okay, thank you for the response to those. Alderman Bram, any follow-up before we move on?
Yeah, just in regards to FMLA, that response, to me, it sounds like what I'm hearing is we can work it out more, I don't know, this is gonna sound bad, but off the record versus utilizing the potential of the Family and Medical Leave Act expansion on what is proposed. I don't know why we would feel that that would be a better path compared to, if not doing the expansion to allow for up to 12 weeks of partially paid leave, do something lesser than that. Obviously, these are circumstances that I don't think any of us have ever expected. I don't know if saying utilizing PTO for something like this when, you know, literally they're on the front lines is probably, at least from my perspective, the right approach. I think that's why the I keep messing it up, Family and Medical Leave Act expansion is proposed before us tonight, to provide a mechanism for those who are, you know, exposing or risking themselves on a day-to-day basis here with COVID-19.
I would respond by saying that the government, the legislature that passed this law, providing for that benefit, also specifically provided that employers of emergency responders can exclude them from that. So the government recognizes the need to balance both the interests of the employees and the interests of the employers of emergency responders, and carved out exceptions for them. So, I think the flexibility that Manager Grabowski is saying that he will exercise is the best approach, rather than be saddled with this ominous requirement that you could have somebody off for 12 weeks, not available to work for you, simply because my kid's school is closed, and rather than make the effort to find somebody else to watch them, I'm just going to stay home and collect this compensation that the statute provides. It's an additional monetary benefit to them also. So I believe that there was a purpose in allowing employers of emergency responders to exclude those, and there was a purpose for the Department of Labor to include all of these employees that you are acting upon, including public works employees within that. That's all I have.
Thank you. Okay, at this time, I'm going to.
Well, could I just ask one more direct question on that?
Sure. Go ahead, Alderman Graham.
I'll just ask, is it legal for us to modify the requirement from 12 weeks to a shorter duration?
I don't have a definitive answer for you. My opinion is you have the right to exclude portions of the statute, which is what you're doing by excluding the emergency paid sick leave requirement. Item 5, I don't know that you can tinker with, well, it says 12 weeks, but we're only going to give you 4 weeks of the statute says you can exempt yourself. Let me just get the provision. It says that you can exclude yourself from the provisions of Section 3102 of the Act, which is the definition of the emergency family medical leave. That section only you can exclude from. The other sections, let me just look. Doesn't say you can exclude from those other sections, so.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is no modification, either all or nothing, exclude or not exclude.
You can, it says you can exclude such employee from the application of the provisions in the amendments made under section 3102 of this act. And that's exactly what you're doing, in both the declaration, the executive order, and, the resolution. It says from application section 3102 of Division C, entitled Emergency Family Medical Leave Expansion Act. I would be reluctant to start hacking up the 12 weeks into smaller segments. Because the statute says this is a qualifying under family medical leave. I think what you would be doing is modifying the family medical leave provisions that are unaffected. They just added another condition of qualifying and said the first 2 weeks of the 12 weeks is unpaid and the next 10 is 2/3. They never touched the length of family medical leave being 12 weeks. So I'd be reluctant to urge that.
Okay, that was my misunderstanding then. I thought this was an expansion to the current duration of the Medical Leave Act. Obviously, what you just stated, that is not the case. Understood.
No, it's only an additional reason for using current FMLA. It changes the amount of time you have to be employed from the 12 weeks, from 12 months and having 1,250 hours of work time in that period to only 30 days. You can't even touch that. It's only the 3102 amendment, which is an additional reason to use the currently existing 12 weeks of family and medical leave.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you.
No further
Thank
questions.
you. All right, thank you, Alderman Graham. Thank you, Mr. Durkin. Mayor Morley, do you have any other comments to make as we conclude our second round here?
Just one minor comment, and that is, I think that ultimate flexibility is what we need in this. And I think everyone has experienced, we don't know what's coming next as it relates to this. We don't know what's going to be thrown at us from a legislative standpoint, either from the state or the federal government. So as Mr. Durkin pointed out, when this was written, they recognized that there was a need for this. I say we take advantage of that option to go back to what I said before. Exercise this on a very almost surgical type of executive order where we're just addressing one small part. And I'll reiterate that all we're looking for is flexibility in how to address that. We're not trying to take any benefits away. And that's my end of my comments.
Thank you. All right, so at this time, I think everyone will recall City Manager Grabowski summarized that the staff has a request for 2 different actions tonight. That the committee will provide a recommendation on. So I'll start, Alderman York, I'll start by entertaining a motion. The first motion to recommend that the mayor sign the executive order that has been attached to board docs, which supports the exclusion of the city's emergency responders, including the public works personnel, from certain provisions of the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, as we've discussed tonight. Do I have
So moved. So moved.
Okay. Alderman York, do I have a second?
I'll second it. This is Alderman Park. Thanks.
Thank you. Director Trudine, can you call, or first off, let me just make sure that everyone understands, or Alderman Graham, does that motion, do you understand the motion on the floor?
I do.
Okay, Director Chazine, can you call a roll call vote, please?
Alderman Toledo,
Yes.
Alderman York,
Aye.
Alderman Braham,
Aye.
Alderman Park.
Aye.
4 yes, 0 no's, all by phone.
Thank you, Director Chazine. That motion passes. And that is to recommend that the mayor signs that executive order, which I expect he'll do shortly after our meeting concludes. The second motion, the second component that I would like to take action on tonight is to entertain another motion to recommend that staff prepares a report to the Seoul City Council, which would be on the City Council's April 6th agenda, supporting both the signing of the mayor's executive order that we just approved or supported, and as well as in that report, supporting the resolution that's posted to board docs that would exclude the emergency responders, including the public works personnel, from certain provisions of the Families First Coronavirus Response Act as we discussed tonight. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Alderman York, do I have a second?
I'll second it. This is Alderman Park. Thanks.
Thank you, Alderman Park. Any questions on the motion? Okay, Director Turzine, can you please call the roll call vote?
Alderman Toledo,
Aye.
Alderman York,
Aye.
Alderman Braham,
Aye.
Alderman Park.
Aye.
4 yes, 0 no, all by phone.
Thank you, Director Turzine, and thank you to everyone who participated in that important discussion. Thank you for everyone being respectful of each other's comments and time on the floor. And we now are going to move on to the next item of business. That's item D, the liability package insurance renewal. And Director Turzine, I believe that you and Mr. Davidson from Assurance are going to provide us with some background on this topic.
That is correct. So I'll just, a brief comment to open up, and then I'll turn it over to Mr. Davidson from Assurance. If the committee recalls, towards the end of last year, November, we presented with Assurance as far as our renewal package of many of our insurances, our coverages, trying to get those onto the calendar year. Part of that review was the liability package and some of the information and preliminary quotes and costs that we were receiving back, Assurance was receiving back, were significant increases for that liability package of insurances. At that time, we were able to just ride out the current term of that through April 30th, and that's where we are right now. We had explained to the committee that we would be going back out with Assurance's help on that package of liability, and that's where we are today. I'd like to just turn it over to Mr. Davidson now from Assurance to give you a little bit more history, and then I'll follow up.
Pardon the interruption. This is Mike Durkin. I'm just going to exit this meeting, and thank you everybody for your attention and hard work on this. Since everybody was so respectful, I would ask that you respect the fact that Don Strino is fast approaching his bedtime hour. Good night, everybody.
I'm going to, Jim, I'm available, so if there's anything that comes up, please text me. And I'll definitely call back in.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chairman.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Okay,
All right,
so let's turn it back over to, I think, Mr. Davidson, is that right?
Correct.
Yes, correct. And Can everyone hear me well?
Yep.
Yes.
All right, perfect. Good. So yes, as Tom said, back in November, when I came out for the 1/1 renewals, which is basically all the lines of coverage other than the liability package that we're going to talk about tonight. Again, we ran into just a situation where Trident, the incumbent carrier, a good carrier, we use them on a number of different municipal clients, but they had underwritten this essentially incorrectly. The reason for that was they had bad information originally. Moving forward, they had renewed it, I want to say 6 or 7 times throughout the years, and had, I believe, understood at a later point that they did underwrite it incorrectly, but then really never amended or corrected the underwriter mistakes that they had. So fast forward to this renewal, this is when they said, we need to correct it. Essentially, you know, now we have the full picture and we need to do that really no matter what. On top of that, they actually kind of changed some of their terms of the renewal. So obviously we knew we needed to go out to market, which we did. And if you look at the attachment, I'm starting basically on the marketing summary. So that's page 3. The title is Marketing Summary. That page, as well as the next page, are the 13 different carriers that we approached for this liability package. And so you'll see on the left column is the carrier themselves. The middle column is the coverages we submitted. And then the right column is all the market's response. We tried to put this in order of first the incumbent, and then the essentially the best options, and then as you go down, you kind of get worse and worse and worse, and kind of ranked them that way. Really, the only thing to note here, I would say, is again we tried to go to a lot of different carriers. We kind of use this as leverage, as well as we really wanted to take a big look at what the marketplace had to offer this year. We are new to the municipality, and we wanted to, again, just make sure that it got a proper marketing as soon as we got on for this package. We also, during the marketing process, we did Assurance did an internal in-house, what we call a 360 diagnostic. So this is sort of a like a carrier coming out and probing and asking questions, looking at procedures, looking at policies. And what we do is we kind of then highlight the good things to underwriting. So instead of just saying, here are the losses, you know, here's the previous premiums and things like that, we say we went out, we asked these questions, and here's where they're really, really strong in their policies and procedures. On top of that, there were a couple carriers that had either done this in the past or had done it this year. That one of the carriers that did that this year for this renewal was Travelers. And I got to say, I was in the meeting with both as they talked to HR as well as the law enforcement. And as we say, it showed very, very well. Elmhurst does a great job in their policies and procedures. And I want to thank Tom Trozine and his team, but also Emily Wagner and her team. I know she's relatively new to the role, and really in that meeting, you wouldn't have known it just with the handle that she had on a lot of the questions that were asked her way. So that was great to see. Kind of bringing it full circle onto, you know, if we move on to page 5, again, if you remember when I came out in November, because of the mistake and the underwriting that Trident had done in the past, and then them correcting it for this renewal, we were expecting and we're getting indications of about 100% to 200% increase. So, I mean, literally double the premium for just this package, if not triple the premium for just this package. We were, although it is admittedly a large increase, we were actually pretty impressed by Travelers coming in at, you'll see the bottom line there, the $212,397. That equates to about a 57% increase from the expiring. Just to give you a little more context, if you look back on page 3, The next best option under Travelers is ICRMT, and then beyond that, it's Safety National. The next best option from a pricing standpoint was about $336,000, almost $337,000. So Travelers really came in very, very competitively. And just to be clear, it is essentially the same coverage. They didn't mess with any limits, mess with any deductibles in order to achieve that pricing. It's essentially a very similar structure, and I can go through some of the changes, but they're relatively minor in order to achieve that pricing. So that's a lot to take in. I'll kind of stop there. Are there any questions off the bat before I kind of get into some of the changes that I do want to highlight?
Any of the committee members have any specific questions at this point in time, or should we let Mr. Davidson go through the rest of his overview?
I prefer the rest of the overview.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Davidson, go ahead. Thank you.
All right, thanks. So the structure of the liability is slightly different from Trident. So we would be moving, we're recommending a move from Trident to Travelers. Travelers essentially writes it in a more traditional way or I should say, by that, I mean, instead of writing, so how Trident writes it is for general liability and employers' benefits liability, law enforcement, all the liability pieces, they write a $10 million, what we call primary limit. How Travelers does it, and this is really the more traditional way to do it, is they'll write a $1 million primary, and then on top of that, they'll put a $10 million umbrella. So you're essentially achieving the same limits, but it is technically a little different structure. It's, again, essentially the same coverage, the same type of coverage, the same, it would react and trigger in the same way, so there's really no difference there. We are also sticking with the $250,000 self-insured retention, so that stays the same as how Trident was. The one thing, the other thing I should say that is changing is if on page 5 you'll look at the pricing chart, so the second larger chart at the second to the last bottom line, it says TPA expenses / loss fund, Travelers loss handling. There's a slight difference here, and we think it's better. So currently, the third-party administrator, or TPA, who handles the liability claims is Carl Warren. How that works is they are a complete separate company from Trident. If we move to Travelers, it'll essentially be Travelers handling the claims, as well as, obviously, the insurance policies themselves. It's a little more streamlined. We just like it because it's essentially just simpler. You know, Travelers handles it from $1, even though the city would still have the $250,000 retention. It's sort of in Travelers' hands as soon as a claim arises. Just to be clear, because of that, Travelers only handles claims starting 5/1 and moving forward. So there are still open claims that kind of linger and essentially just need to be eventually closed out. Carl Warren, who is the current TPA, would handle those, what we call kind of cradle to grave, until all of those are closed out, hopefully, you know, usually within 12 to 18 months. And then you are essentially completely moving away from Carl Warren, and Travelers handles the claims, again, cradle to grave into the future as they open and get adjusted and then shut. Any questions on any of those items?
Aldermen, committee members? Mr. Davidson, is there anything else that you want to provide an overview on? And then I can go and ask the aldermen for any questions or comments at that time.
That's essentially...
Is that essentially it?
Yeah, that's essentially it. I mean, all of the sort of a more detailed overview, which again, I won't go into, it's another 10 pages, but really starts on page 14 and then goes to the end. This is just kind of breaking out, you know, the primary for the law enforcement and then the primary for the general liability and things like that. But again, it's all essentially the same coverage as what we're moving away from with Trident. So that's pretty much the summary of it.
Okay, great. Thank you. Director Terzine, do you want to add anything before I go and ask for the comments from the alderman?
Yes, please. Just one additional comment I did review with Mr. Davidson as far as, it was our attempt to try to get everything on the calendar year. My understanding in my discussion with Mr. Davidson is that Travelers is open to and has agreed to take a look at a cancel/rewrite at December 31st of 20 to get us possibly at that. So that is something we'll pursue later in the year as far as getting this last policy on the calendar year.
Okay, thank you. And I also know, I believe that our Director of Human Resources, Emily, is in the room still. Does Emily or anyone else on staff want to make any comments before I open it up to the committee?
She is shaking her head no. She's sitting at the far end of the room.
Okay, great. Then I'll go ahead and we'll kind of try to use the same format. Seemed to work well in our last agenda item as far as going through committee members' comments and questions. So I'll start with Alderman York.
Yeah, I'm always on the hot seat first here. So, well, I think this is a pretty favorable outcome, considering what we were hearing earlier, like back in November and everything. So, obviously, Travelers is a well-known company, highest rating. I think it's the highest rating for an insurance company. And it looks like, we're comparing apples to apples in almost every regard. I understand the difference between the 1 million base and the 10 million umbrella. I really have, no questions. I am in support of making this change. I guess I asked Tom Terzine this earlier today, but at the top of your chart on page 5, the little chart above the big chart, I think the first thing that just threw me for a loop was under the item you have budget expenditures. Should that not be asset value or physical plant value or something like that?
So that's a great question. So I'll say a couple things there. So that entire top chart is essentially not exactly, but essentially the larger exposure items that all the liability below is sort of based on. So for example, the budget expenditures really mostly, but not exclusively, relates to general liability. And if you were to cut that in half by, say, 50%, that doesn't necessarily mean the general liability premium would then, in lockstep, be decreased by 50%. So I'll say sort of that up front. To your question, the asset value is sort of less taken into consideration for just the liability lines, which is just what we're talking about here, because that would really deal more with the property.
Yeah. Okay. I got it. Yep.
Yeah. So again, we had renewed that. That's with Chubb. They would want that because that's what they would use as their limit, and that would be also what they base their rate off of. Same exact idea, but it's just applying it to the liability, so they use a different exposure data point.
Okay, the budget expenditures, that number just doesn't compute with me and things I've seen in the budget and so on and so forth. So I will trust that everybody's got all the basis for this proper, valued properly, and I really have no concerns. I'm in support of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman York. Alderman Park?
I appreciate all the research and compiling it in the presentation. It sounds good to me. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Bram?
No questions, thanks.
Mayor Morley, any comments?
Nothing to add.
Thank you. I'm also in support of this, but I will echo Alderman York's comment and question on the budget expenditures. I mean, in that 194, Director Terzine, I believe, is like how much we would spend this year, assuming we don't cut any expenses and assuming we spend the full PEB that was contemplated back in like October of 2019, which we know very well that we're not going to expend all of that. So is there any savings on the premium if that budget expenditure item is more accurate to what we actually think we're going to spend over the course of this, the annual premium or the policy being in effect? Thank you.
So just
Yes,
to follow up, I'll let Bob, deal with the premium payment and stuff. Him and I did discuss this briefly. So that actually is our total budgeted expenses. I did pull the budget ordinance and that you can find that number to the penny in our budget ordinance of all of our expenditures. It just so happened, and I talked to Alderman York earlier and stuff, our total asset value is also 194 million and some change, very close. But this does match up to our budgeted expenditures for 2020.
Thank you for clarifying that, Tom.
But at the same time, I know that that's what we passed back in December, but the Finance Committee, as we all know, since we're on it, we have been talking for multiple meetings before the COVID-19 situation of looking at both revenues and expenses. And we know that we're delaying some of our contemplated expenses that were in the CAB for this year and next year and the third year. And now with coronavirus, I believe that we're going to talk about this in the next agenda or a couple agenda items later, but we're going to also probably try to push off some other things. So I think my point being is that our approved budget expenditures for 2020 of 194 million is guaranteed to be less than that.
Yeah, so I can maybe contextualize your question a little more, and it might be helpful. So the first thing I'll say is there are, within all insurance policies, there are essentially, liability insurance policies. There are auditable policies and non-auditable policies. So the classic example is a workers' compensation policy that is always auditable. So at the end of the year, at the beginning of the year, you estimate payrolls, let's say just $1 million. At the end of the year, you have only 750,000. So you would report that, it would be reflected, and then you would get a return premium at the end, or I'm sorry, essentially after that policy term is up. For this is actually a non-auditable item. So because of that, if we put in 149 million and change, and it ends up being, let's say, just 100 million even, we cannot, after the fact, kind of go back to travelers and say, look at our expenses. It was cut almost in half. Can we have, let's just say, $15,000 back from our general liability premium? So, but what we can do is, it's kind of a weird thing because we've never done this before, but obviously with what's going on, it's obviously very unprecedented. We can go back to travelers and say, that was the original estimate, as you said back in, I think you said October. With what's going on, we need to revise that down to, I'm just throwing numbers out, but down to 150 million even. What will that do to the premium? Again, it will not, as a percentage wise, it will not, bring down the general liability the exact same percentage, but we can argue that that general liability should come down. It may also affect, but I'm not sure, but it may also affect the public entity management liability. That there's one in the middle there, and it also again might affect the umbrella. So I'm more than happy to go back to the underwriter and say, listen, this was using a budget that is now being put into disarray. What we can guarantee is that it's going to go down. and see what they can do for premium relief on that.
Okay, thank you for that explanation. I'm happy to hear that and understand that there's potentially some flexibility. I guess my follow-up question to that is, and I understand you can't, you sitting here can't guarantee anything, but I also know that we're under a bit of a time crunch, which is part of the reason why we have this special meeting today. And so I guess I ask Tom and yourself and anyone else that wants to provide some input. I think I'm still in support of going with Travelers. Should the committee approve going with Travelers with this, but not necessarily approve the premium prices until we do that follow-up? Or what would be the appropriate procedure given that information and given our time crunch of needing to get this in front of the city council April 6th with a report? Thank you.
So from my end, this is Bob again with Assurance. From my end, what we could do is speak with Tom, get a, possibly a revised number, go back to Travelers and give them the number and essentially start the argument there. From a timing aspect, it is essentially, for lack of a better term, kind of already put through their system. So I would think that would be, once I have the number, that would be relatively quick, meaning call it 2 full business days, maybe even less, to get a revised, well, I should say, to get an answer, first of all, and then to get a revised premium if that's allowable.
Alderman Toledo, this is Tom Trozine. Is it okay if we put in the committee report a not to exceed that, and then city staff with Assurance's help will see if we can get that reduced and stuff, but draft the committee report with a not to exceed the 212?
That seems reasonable and probably is maybe a good idea, Tom, of how to handle that. I think it's worth having that conversation. But I also think that the committee, understands where we're at and that might not happen, but that would solve kind of a couple of problems, not having to come back and solve the timing problem and put it kind of in staff's hands to try to make best effort at making that argument with Assurance and Travelers. Do any of the other committee members have comments on this line of discussion?
Chair Toledo, this is Alderman York. So I think that's a good solution. We always have the ability to go ahead and issue the report, but we could also, the evening of the meeting, amend the dollar amount in the report to what the new amount would be. So there's a couple different ways to skin the cat, but I think either one of them are fine. That's all.
Alderman Park, Alderman Bram.
Agree with
I
what
think that sounds
York
like
just
a,
said.
yeah, me too. I think let's do what we need to do so that we can make this happen in the time that we need to.
Okay. Given that, then I think that we're all in agreement that going with Travelers makes sense for all the reasons that staff and Mr. Davidson enumerated, but that we also would like to amend, because there is a report posted, so I will entertain a motion to approve the report with the slight amendment of a not to exceed number.
So moved.
Who was that? Sorry.
Michael, so moved.
Okay, Alderman Bram is the motion. Second?
I'll second it. This is Tina.
Okay, Alderman Park, thank you. So then, Director Trozine, can you please call a roll call vote?
Alderman
So,
Toledo.
Oh, sorry, Alderman.
So are we gonna, yeah, so I don't disagree, but are we going to change the recommendation to say not to exceed, or are we gonna leave it in the amount of and then change it that evening?
I would
like to, go ahead, Director Trozine.
I would suggest to change the language not to exceed And then even if we don't have anything for Monday, we still could adjust the contract, the resolution that will be following on April 20th meeting. So we could actually change the contract language in there for the amount if we don't hear by Monday on a revised number.
And
this is
I would,
Tina.
I was, oh,
Go ahead, Alderman Park.
that's what I was thinking, is that we were just gonna do not to exceed. It just seems more seamless and allows us to move forward.
And I was going to add that I would modify the report slightly with the not to exceed, but also the fact of what we're trying to pursue and why. Namely that why our premium might be able to be negotiated. I don't know, something about the fact that our expenditures are going to be less than what we expected when the budget was approved, and we're pursuing further negotiations before the council meeting or something like that. So back to the motion. Alderman Graham, do you still support your motion?
Yes.
And Alderman Park, second?
Yes, I do.
All right. Any further comments? Okay, Director Chuzin, please call a roll call.
Alderman Toledo,
Aye.
Alderman York,
Aye.
Alderman Braham,
Aye.
Alderman Park.
Aye.
4 yes, 0 no, all by phone.
Okay, thank you. Motion passes. The report is approved as amended during the motion. And I know that Director Truzine, you're a little concerned since this is a Tuesday night meeting and the agenda needs to be posted on Thursday. I just alert the committee members that the turnaround for the amended or the slightly altered report will be quicker than normal. So we're looking to do that tomorrow or Thursday morning. We will move on now to item E on the agenda, Government Insurance Network update. I think Director Truzine or Wagner are going to address this information for us.
And I'm sorry for the interruption. This is Bob Davidson with Assurance. I'm just going to exit now, if that's all right.
Yeah, sorry. Thank you, Mr. Davidson, and thank you in advance for the efforts on the change in the expenditures.
Oh, of course, you're welcome, and thanks everybody for their time.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Bob.
Bye.
I'm going to turn it right over to HR Director Wagner.
Thank you. So this afternoon, we posted a memo onto Board Docs that had some information about the medical renewal for the July 1st year. So I'm not sure if you had a chance to look at that. I will go through it. There's just some high points. So in the interest of time, we'll get right to it. At the March GIN board meeting, the pool, they approved an 18-month medical and dental insurance renewal. So that starts July 1st through December of 2021. So this is for 18 months. Typically, insurance goes for 12 months, but in the interest of aligning the insurance year with the calendar year, the pool went forward with the 18-month plan. The blended, basically for all the insurance plans, so the increase is 3.17%. The broker has indicated to us that 3.17% is actually a very good rate, especially for that long period. The only plan design change that you'll see this year is ortho coverage for all. Right now, the only ortho coverage is for children, so that'll be added for all people who are on the insurance plan. The only, I would say, cost to that, adding the ortho for all the employees is an extra $2 per month for the employee. The city also agreed with the 18 months, and open enrollment is tentatively scheduled for the beginning of May. And that's it.
Thank you, Director Wagner. Any questions, Alderman York?
No, I read the memo earlier. I think I would just like to confirm with city staff that the dental insurance is paid 100% by the employee. So there's really no additional cost to the city, I don't think. It's a really nice benefit and it's really cheap, but I think it's borne by the employee. Am I not correct?
No, actually, it's borne by both. It's borne by the city and the staff member.
But just so, I mean,
And
but
what
the city's rate is sort of even and stuff. So our increase will not go up. The increase will all be borne by the employee.
Just as
That I thought we had a base rate that we've always charged any additions or increases have always been borne by the employee. That was my point.
That's correct.
Correct.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, Alderman York. Alderman Park?
No questions, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Alderman Graham?
No further questions.
Mayor Morley?
No comment.
Okay, and I also don't have any questions, and this agenda item does not require any action by the committee. It was just a update. So thank you very much, Director Wagner, for that information. And we will move on then to item F, the 2019 and 2020 revenue and expenditure review topic. Director Trezine.
Thank you. I know it's been mentioned quite a few times tonight that we are definitely in unique times. I know the committee has been talking quite a bit about, revenues and expenditures, as Chair Toludo mentioned earlier also. For tonight, just because of the late hour and, we've been looking at the numbers since really this started this crisis that we're in. We have started to take a look at our 2019 of where we're going to end up. Our auditors will be in a couple of weeks. So we've been putting together all of the schedules and information and the CAFR to meet with them and everything. So hopefully by the time the Finance Committee meets next in a week and a half, we'll have a better idea of where we will end up in 19. I'm pretty comfortable with saying, if everybody took a look at the budget book, I think we were estimating possibly, a use of our fund balance in 19 of about almost $5 million. I'm very confident that I know that's going to come in a lot better than that number, mostly due to, carryovers that don't happen in the current year. They get carried over. Some of those expenditures don't have a funding source, so it's a bigger hit. So as an example, in the budget book, our proposed 2020 was estimating a use of fund balance in our general fund of about 4.2 million. That now is about 7.2 million, just again with the carryovers. But I'm still confident in where, outside of the COVID-19 issue, that we would have come in better in 2020 than what we were expecting at about 12.6 million. That was still within our range of 25 to 33%. And again, we'll have better idea of where this all, but we've been spending a lot of time on trying to figure out what could be the impact with that, especially on the revenues. I think it was mentioned already. We've asked all the directors to take a look at their budget, to come back to us with potential reductions, potential cuts, and then even including capital. But right now, staff has implemented a hiring freeze. We're taking a look at all of the expenditures, and we're taking a look at capital, what can be deferred, what can be canceled regarding that. For the revenue projections side of it, basically started going back to 2008, just as a starting point, just to give a flavor for what happened in 08 to our revenues and what could we expect. Again, unique times. We've never been here like this. Everybody is aware of the economy basically coming to a standstill. So taking a look at the 2008 experience, and then actually what revenues are being impacted. From obviously sales taxes, our largest revenue source, what happened in 08, what could happen now. Home rule sales tax, income tax, our local and state MFT money, hotel taxes, food and beverage, real estate transfer stamps, permits, interest income, fines and penalties. Those are all of the revenues, at least at first glance, that I think could be impacted by COVID-19 and this issue that we're all facing and stuff. Do I have rough estimates? Yes, but very preliminary. If you want, I can get into some of the detail, but again, we're still looking. I know IML is looking at it closely, hopefully going to help out communities on looking at this. We have not heard anything from that. Another community of what they're doing. So we're trying to get some feedback and what makes sense. But again, there's so much unknown that we're going to be facing, here in the next couple of months, especially now with the extension and stuff. So basically, those are the highlights of it. Again, I can get into some detail. We know we're going to face a lot of different things. Even again, it's only the end of March. But again, we know we had a great year in the stock market in 2019. So hopefully that's going to be a positive impact when we get our actuary reports, hopefully within the next month back, that those are going to be positive. But I think when we review those, we're going to need to consider, what could possibly happen in 2020, especially with the market down, 20 to 30% already and everything. So I just wanted to share again, just with some of this that's going to be impacted, and it's not only the general fund. We're going to take a hit in our capital improvement fund. Again, if the committee recalls, 80% of our income tax goes to the capital improvement fund. We know we're going to take a hit, with that and everything. How big? Again, questionable right now. Our stormwater fund, our home rule sales tax, we collect about $7 million in home rule sales tax. We've been studying that quite a bit in regards to stormwater and everything. So possibly, if we look at 08, what could be an impact of the home rule sales tax? I'm not sure. Is it a 25 to 30% reduction that could happen in 2020? That's almost $2 million. And if you split it up, half of it goes to the general fund. That's $1 million. 25% of it goes to the capital improvement fund, $500,000, and stormwater fund, $500,000. So those just some examples of what we're looking at, what kind of impact could there be with this. That's really all I have right now and stuff. Again, I know it's drastic times. We made it through 2008. We made it through 2001. We'll make it through this. Is it going to be painful? Yes, but I know we'll get through it.
Thank you, Dr. Kuzine. Questions from the committee. Alderman York.
Thank you, Chairman Saludo. So I did speak with Tom earlier this afternoon, and just a couple things. And I did get a text message and had a call with Alderman Dunn earlier today too. And as you all recall, Alderman Dunn, he said, well, maybe I'll quit my job and volunteer for the mayor's finance task force, because I'm sure Mayor Morley is planning to appoint a task force for this. One thing, I think the biggest thing, here is the fact that unlike in 2009, coming out of the 2008 financial crisis, the city is in great shape. We've got an outstanding general fund. We had $3 million in the general fund in 2009. So as Tom alluded to, there's some significant changes in the foundation of our finances. But at least we're on a solid ground going into it where we weren't before. So that to me provides some level of comfort at this very uncertain time. I think, as Tom alluded to, there's a lot of moving parts right now. And I think that, with all due respect, I think that postponing a really meaningful discussion on this to a time when we have a little bit more hard information and everything is probably a really good decision. But I certainly respect the chairman's prerogative to do what she pleases. But I think that, from my perspective, just need some more information, some guidance as best we can get, and we'll put together a good tool to work on this together and come up with some great solutions. I'd just like to thank Chairman Toludo, for, pointing out the expenditure number in the previous two agenda items ago and raising that and saying, hey, that's what it was then. I think we all agree with Chairman Toludo that that's not what it's going to be when it's all said and done. So those were my initial thoughts right off the bat. But here on the East Coast, it's 10:40. I'm way past my bedtime. And, I really look forward to working to solve this problem with all of you. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman York. Alderman Park?
My only question is, Kevin, are you quarantining in Florida?
Yes, I am.
Oh, you lucky man. Soak up some sun for us. But otherwise, yeah, I think there's just so much unknown and things have changed like exponentially just in the last couple of weeks that I think there's like no way to process all of it. So I think in order to make an informed decision, we need to collect some more just information, data, and see what we can do about this. I mean, I had texted the mayor, I have heard about other communities trying to offer some relief to their residents in a variety of different ways and to their small businesses. And, if we are in a really good spot and we are able to do anything to help people out, I would love to consider those options if that's something that staff can look at. But I know we got to pay our bills. So I just, it's going to be a puzzle that we'll solve, and it'll be hard, but we can do it. We can do hard things together. The end.
Thank you, Alderman Park. Alderman Graham?
Yeah, I would be interested, and I doubt that there's any news on this topic at this time, but has there been any discussion of federal and or state funding back to our level, the municipality level, due to this, or loans or anything along those lines due to this crisis or pandemic? And the other question was in regards to, Tommy, your statement, Director Trozine, your statement on the carryovers. I get that the carryovers, I guess you could look at it in a way, would help our fund balance since it's unspent money. But I never considered it to be anything unless we're removing those expenditures out of the budget in 2020 that were in 2019 tied to those carryovers on how that could help us.
Thank you, Alderman Graham. Director Trezine, do you want to address Alderman Graham's questions?
So, right, on the carryovers, usually it is a wash. I agree. So again, I think I mentioned it earlier. 19 is going to come in better than the budget projected, reflected, just because, again, of the carryovers. 2020 is going to look worse because those expenditures are now in 2020. And most of them, I think we had $3 million, actually $4 million in expenditure carryovers and only about $1 million in a funding source. So again, that's why the general fund looks worse in 2020 because of that net $3 million to the bad. So I totally agree with Alderman Graham. And the first question again?
Federal grants.
So the federal grant, yes, thanks. So we just applied, we put in our application today for public assistance, basically FEMA, because it was declared an emergency, that hopefully there are federal dollars. So we are tracking all of our COVID-19 related expenditures to hopefully get some type of a reimbursement back on that. We don't know yet what percentage or how much, but I believe there will be some dollars available for us to be reimbursed.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I just wanted to, kind of reiterate the sentiment of we will all get through this together. I have a lot of confidence both in our community and our elected officials and in our staff. I also agree that we don't have enough information, and even if we were to get information today, I would be willing to go to a casino if it was open and put money on the fact that that information would be different next week. We need to get to a point where things begin to sort of stabilize and we begin to understand how and when we'll come out of this, so that we can begin to make some better informed decisions. But I do want to assure everyone on the committee and any members of the public or any elected officials listening that Director Trezine and myself are in very constant, ongoing communication about what we're doing, what we're looking at, and just keeping a pulse on things as they change so that we can react if we need to react to any situation that comes up financially. And I would encourage anyone, Alderman Park, you kind of mentioned any types of assistance that we might be able to do. Anyone with any ideas, please feel free to reach out to me directly or to city staff or to your individual alderman with questions, and we can all share and move forward together. So any other questions or comments from the committee or staff on agenda item F?
Alderman Saluto, Chairman Saluto.
Yeah.
I just had one other question too. I think kind of spurred by a comment that Alderman Bramman made. Have we, and I think I know the answer to this, but have we been in touch with our insurance company to inquire about revenue interruption coverage? I know it's something that, we can at least make the claim. That's all.
We will follow up with assurance. Some of the larger companies that we do cover, I'm not so sure that policy would kick in this case, but we will definitely follow up with them.
Great, thank you. So this agenda item also did not require any action from the committee. It was more of an update and discussion. So I'm going to move on from that item. And given this is a special meeting, we do not have any other agenda items. We will be moving straight to adjournment. I would like to just thank everybody for their participation and their time. I know this has been a long meeting, but I know that we all recognize that this is an important item to discuss. So thank you very much. And I will now entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Alderman Brown.
Me too.
And Alderman Clark seconds that. Director Trezine, can you please, just call a roll call on that. It'll be easier than a voice vote.
Alderman Toledo.
Aye.
Alderman York.
Aye.
Alderman Bram.
Aye.
Alderman Park.
Aye.
4 yes, 0 no's, all by votes.
Okay, the motion to adjourn is approved, and our finance committee meeting is adjourned at 9:48 p.m. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.
Good night.
Night, thank you.
Thank you. Good
Good night, guys.
Night.
night.